is the worst podcast I've ever been on.
These guys are shit. It's true. It's true.
This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hard-Traveling Fanboys, 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 Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Welcome once again, Place to Be Nation listeners, to a very special
and short
Christmas week edition of the longest running weekly episodic comic book podcast in all
Place to Be Nation.
And as you can probably tell on this recording, I am coming to you from a remote location somewhere in the American Southeast. The greater Gulf Coast region, and I am certainly on location doing a remote, as we call it in the business. For those of you who aren't in the know, a remote is when you go to a location and you beam your message in to the central headquarters. So, Nick, how are things in the Vancouver area?
Oh, they're good. They're cold, as Christmas should be. Not like where we're back where we are, where it's going to be in the 70s this week again.
Ugh. What a happy Christmas time. And it would not be Christmas time if you didn't have feuding families and just assorted hijinks. It's the time.
Feuding families, kissing cousins, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Kissing Cousins was a hell of an Elvis movie too.
It was.
Not to be confused with Clam Bake or Kid Galahad or some of the other classics. But nonetheless, we are here to bring you an episode to keep the streak alive in Wing It Month. And as you know, Nick, there's a pretty big motion picture out right now.
I'm aware. I of all people, I'm a little bit aware.
Yes, and it of course is the movie Cats.
Cats, yes,
which is just lighting the world on fire.
Hey,
at the moment.
you know, I never knew anything about Cats. Like literally, I knew that it was a Broadway musical that was very popular for a long time. The extent of my knowledge about Cats was when Hey Arnold, the cartoon series on Nickelodeon, parodied it with rats, and that was funny. But I was reading an article about Cats. You know, one of the lead characters' name in that movie is Bombalurina. What a name! What a name, Bombalurina.
Bombalurina. Wow, that is fascinating. And one of the other things that's interesting about that movie is it's an abomination before God.
How do you know? You haven't seen it.
I've seen the trailers, and the trailers show me effects. I don't know if the plot could be the greatest thing in the world for all I know. It could have great music and all that stuff, but all I know is that CGI looks rough. It's a song dogs make. And a sound they make, too. But all that aside, we're not here to talk about Cats.
Where's the musical Dogs? Well, that would be good. We should make that.
That's actually going to be the crossover event of the future. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got a franchise now.
Yep.
We're about to enter the Singing Animals
expanded universe,
cinematic expanded universe.
There we go.
Leading to the Avengers, which will include cats, dogs, pigeons, and goldfish.
Goldfish. What about beta fish?
I don't know what those are.
Those are those fish that, like, you can't put two of them in the same tank or else they'll, like, murder each other. And if you put one of them near a mirror, it'll kill itself from trying to attack the glass. And
sounds like a microcosm of the American political system. Am I right?
I suppose so. Something Marge shot Mein Kampf.
Marge shot reading excerpts of Mein Kampf.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're not here to talk about any of that. We're here to talk about Star Wars, of course. Star Wars fever shaking the nation, racing through box office receipts, racing through popular culture. Just last night, I was
racing through Twitter debates once again.
Twitter debates once again, which seems to be all that happens now with Star Wars movies. But I just last night I was watching on TNT The Return of the Jedi, my favorite Star Wars movie, followed by The Force Awakens, a better than I remembered it Star Wars movie. So a lot of good stuff to talk about with Star Wars. But we're not going to talk about the movies because they're not comic book related. But let's tell you what are. Let me rephrase that. Let's tell you what is comic book related, and that is a Star Wars branded comic book. And we got one for you, folks. Mm-hmm. There have been many over the years.
Tons.
Dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands.
Yeah. No, legitimately, there have probably been somewhere in the neighborhood of hundreds of titles, probably thousands of issues. I mean, dating back to the 70s, Marvel had a long-running Star Wars comic in the wake of the first one. Then, of course, Dark Horse had the license for many years and published many, many books. And then Marvel eventually got it back a few years ago, and since then has been cranking out Star Wars comics pretty efficiently themselves. So, if you're on Marvel Unlimited and you type in Star Wars, you will be. I'm pretty sure that when Marvel bought the rights back to start back from Lucasfilm, for Star Wars, or when Disney bought the rights from Lucasfilm for Star Wars, they actually got all the Dark Horse back issues that are on Marvel Unlimited. So, pretty interesting backload of stuff. If you want a place to read some Star Wars comics, Marvel Unlimited has damn near everything you can want.
Absolutely. And one of the things we were trying to scramble to for Wing It Month for this episode is what kind of Star Wars comics should we review? We reviewed modern Star Wars comics. We certainly went back and did the Darth Vader comic by Kieran Gillen, I believe. Which was awesome. Star Wars comic by Jason Aaron, I believe.
Which is pretty good.
And we wanted to dig back. We wanted to go back into the archives and do an old Star Wars comic, but we couldn't find a hook. We couldn't find an entry point, a way to go in and jump in and really review a collection. So we decided to bend the rules of the Longbook Hunters a little bit, and instead of finding a collection, we found a novelty issue called Star Wars Devilworlds that appears to have been released in 1996, and these are color reprints of black and white Star Wars comics from Marvel UK in the early 80s. This was a black and white magazine titled Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. And Marvel UK basically commissioned some of their finest creators at the time to write Star Wars stories, short stories for their magazine. And for those who may not be aware, and this is probably a topic that we would have to draw in an expert to talk on another episode, but Marvel UK, as I understand it, is a very interesting history, or has a very interesting history unto itself, as sort of a standalone entity that had the Marvel logo attached to it. So a lot of oddities happened under the Marvel UK banner. But we're here to talk about one that caught our eye, not on the basis of the premise of it, which is a collection of old short stories that are reprinted, but rather one of the creators attached to it. Because this is, to our ever-ending shock, a collection that includes Star Wars stories written by the great Alan Moore. Now, Nick, you were the one that actually caught this comic on Marvel Unlimited, and what were your thoughts when you saw Star Wars and Alan Moore together?
Oh, I had to read it. Full credit where credit's due to the excellent work and website Comic Book Herald. Dave Busing runs that. We've referenced him a few times on the show before. I was just out there looking for Star Wars comics that we could read. Originally, you and I were going to attempt to do the first volume of the 1970s original Star Wars comic, just to go back and look at that. And so when I was looking for Star Wars reading orders on Comic Book Herald to see what would be something good to read, he kind of had listed his favorite Star Wars comics and mentioned this one that was written by Alan Moore, and it's very short, and it was on Marvel Unlimited. So I said, hey, Alan Moore, Marvel Unlimited, very short, checks all the boxes that we're looking to hit this week. And so we read it, or I read it, and you read half of it.
Okay, that's not entirely true. We did not really work out exactly what we were reading. I didn't know what Devilworlds Part 2 was at the time that we started this. I knew there was one issue. I didn't know there were two necessarily until I finished the first issue, and I just finished it today. So I did not have time to read the second issue of Devilworlds, which was actually 4 Alan Moore stories, which I would have rather read.
I think it's just 3 in the second.
Oh,
the second issue.
3.
Yeah.
It is short. I did notice it was a little shorter.
Yeah, 6 pages shorter. So,
but we read the first issue of Devilworlds from '96, and this has 4 stories in it. Mm-hmm. And the first of these is actually, and I always hate leading off with the sort of highlight of the show, but to me, yes. I thought this was easily the best story of this collection, and it is called Dark Lord's Conscience by writer Alan Moore and artist John Stokes, and credit to the letterer John Aldrich and the colorist James Sinclair. I don't know anything about the artist John Stokes, but I thought he was really good here. But the real reason we're talking about this collection is Alan Moore. And Nick, I thought this was a perfect marriage of what I was kind of hoping for from an Alan Moore Star Wars comic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing we should note is that these were originally published, as many British comics were of the era, in black and white. So all the colorist work done on these was done later on when they were collected for a U.S. release. Correct.
And so this when I say what I expected from Alan Moore, what I mean by that is a story that has twists that I don't expect, and also a story that deals with some sort of dark irony. A lot of Alan Moore's stories deal with this, twists of fate, sort of almost things that are almost humorous in how dark and psychological they become. And that's certainly the case here, as the story Dark Lord's Conscience, as you might expect, focuses on Darth Vader. And in particular, in this story, it is focusing on Darth Vader as he's playing a giant board game, essentially, on a planet called Cheelit, and the game is called Firepath. And he's playing against and stop me if you've heard this in an Alan Moore story, he's playing against a giant squid person. And they are playing. This squid is like the queen or the princess of this planet, it appears, and they're playing this what appears to be this very dignified game involving life-sized chess pieces and stones that they move over, and the stones then light on fire and consume the chess pieces, like a giant game of war, essentially. And it's a side of Vader that we don't often see in the films, where he's a diplomat and he's sort of charming this ruler as they're playing this game. And meanwhile, there is an infiltrator coming in to take out Darth Vader. And it's a creature that is a mutant in the Star Wars universe. This is a creation of Alan Moore, and another one of his patented compelling creations. And it is this person has the ability, and is an empath, has the ability to force everyone to face the horrors and the atrocities that they've committed, to basically cause their consciences to attack them. And his name is Clat the Shamer. And he is an endlessly fascinating figure. And he's just working his way through stormtroopers throughout this story, making them all remember their worst atrocities. And most of these stormtroopers are either killing themselves or killing each other. They're rendered completely deceased as he's just going through wiping out waves of stormtroopers that are supposed to be protecting Vader. Meanwhile, Vader is playing this game with the Queen, and they're sort of talking in coded language to each other. They're being nice, but there's clearly something behind all of their speeches that they're saying to each other, and a lot of BS between them. And then, of course, when Clat the Shamer finally arrives at the chamber, his plan is to force Darth Vader, the most evil man in the galaxy, to face all of the countless atrocities that he's faced. And as you might expect in this story, things don't work out for Clat the Shamer. In fact, it doesn't work out for anybody that isn't Darth Vader. And I thought this was what I loved about this story, Nick, was it was not only Alan Moore showing a mastery of comic book writing, as you would expect, but it was Alan Moore showing what I felt was a somewhat surprising handle on one of the most iconic characters in pop culture, because this felt like Darth Vader. This felt like a story that could have been written today about Darth Vader. And this new character, which you don't really see mutants a lot in the Star Wars universe, but this character that Alan Moore brings in of Clat the Shamer was so compelling and so mysterious that I found myself wondering what's going to happen when he and Vader finally come face to face. And then it's not enough that Vader just takes out Clat the Shamer. Vader also makes it clear that the entire time he's been there, he's known exactly what was going on. Mm-hmm. I thought this was great, man. What did you think of this story?
Yeah, it was awesome. I enjoyed it very much indeed. Really, not that I'm surprised that I want to read more of Alan Moore writing Darth Vader, because the man can write damn near anything. But it was a bit surprising to see just how well it worked. It was outstanding. Really can't say anything else about it. I mean, his writing of this was perfect. The story was really intriguing. It brought something new that I'd never seen to the Star Wars universe. And yeah, that's the other thing we should mention is these are 100% out of continuity. And we all know that because Disney came along and wiped the slate clean as it relates to expanded universe content. But even when these were published, they were considered to be out of continuity. There's actually a footnote, or not a footnote, I guess a header on the table of contents page that establishes even at the time, continuity kind of wasn't a concern for the writers and artists of Marvel UK. The idea was just create entertaining stories and not really to get too worked up in terms of where all this fit, because these were actually published before Empire Strikes Back, or right around the time Empire Strikes Back was getting ready to come out. So this would have been early 80s or right after Empire into the maybe 81, 82. So they weren't trying to fit in any larger narrative. It was just cool stories being told in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. And so that's sort of, where we're at with this whole story. It's the classic Darth Vader that we know and fear from the first two movies.
Now, some would suggest that, there is no sympathetic backstory today, seeing as how he murdered a room full of children.
Well, some would suggest that. That's true. And that's fair. I think that's fair. Certainly you couldn't excuse that. However, one could say that the Jedi Council pushed a young Anakin Skywalker into the actions that would lead to the deaths of countless younglings. But that's just
younglings, Anakin.
Younglings. You've been drinking Yinglings, Anakin. Nonetheless, I also want to comment on the art here from John Stokes. I don't know anything about him, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Mm-hmm. However, I want to learn more about him. I thought his art here was great. The facial expressions, particularly of these stormtroopers as they're uncovering the depths of their sins and their atrocities that they've committed in the past. The way that he draws Vader with such a cool, calm demeanor. So good. So good. And if you like fried squid, you'll love this story.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. Let's move on to the second story, Dark Knight's Devilry. Knight spelled with a K as in Batman, the Dark Knight. And this is written by Steve Moore, one of the three Moore brothers, alongside Moore and Alan Moore. And, of course, the artist, the legendary Alan Davis, famous in comic book circles for many comics over the years. However, I have to say, art aside, this story really didn't do anything for me. This focuses on Luke and Leia, and based on the timeline, I'm guessing sometime between New Hope and Empire.
That's what it seems like, yeah.
And they have been, when the story starts, captured by an Imperial force of stormtroopers. And they're being transported to be turned over to Darth Vader, but they get bombarded by this group of outlaws led by this lady, and I can't for the life of me remember her name. But this lady kidnaps Luke and Leia and makes them her hostages. Well, come to find out, Luke and Leia ended up on this distant planet because they are on the quest for a mysterious crystal that can turn back time. And or so they've been told, and it can turn back time to any point they would like, and they want to create a world where the Empire never existed. Of course, the outlaw leader now wants to turn back time to make herself the Empress of the universe, as we find out. So they're going to this fortified Empire stronghold to try to find this mysterious crystal. And when they get there, the place is booby-trapped. Spoiler alert, it's booby-trapped. And it turns out that it was all a plan by Darth Vader. There was no crystal. He planted the plans for the fake crystal on an abandoned ship in orbit around this random planet, and just somehow knew that eventually Leia or Luke, one or the other, would find this, and the other would join them and go to this deserted planet and search for said crystal.
Absolutely.
So it turns out that it was him, Nick. It was him all along. And at the end of it, they throw a grenade at Darth Vader. It blows up, and we're not sure if Darth Vader survived or not. Spoiler alert, he survived.
He survived, yep. You know, a couple of things. One, it would be nice to see a version of Darth Vader played by Vince McMahon. Two, it would be even better to see that particular version of Vader then written by Alan Moore. Can you imagine it? Alan Moore writing
God.
Vince McMahon as Darth Vader? There you go.
Oh my God. I think you just wrote the next trilogy of Disney Star Wars movies.
Oh God! If only there were a way for that to happen, but sadly there is not. No, I'm here with you. I think perhaps the idea of the story would have been interesting, but like the writing was very stilted and stereotypical in a way that it wasn't for the Alan Moore story, and the art was okay, but mostly just a
was
time
it
filler
not
here.
Was it not somewhat distracting that Luke Skywalker looked like He-Man?
Well, I mean, Luke with that haircut from A New Hope, it's kind of hard not to make him look like He-Man once you draw him in comic book art, you know?
That's fair. I forgot the New Hope haircut aspect of it.
He didn't change his haircut until Empire, and then he changed it back for Return of the Jedi.
Oh boy. Yeah, so this one, unfortunately, for our purposes was a bit of a dud. And honestly, I'm not really sure how I feel about a crystal that can turn back time in the Star Wars universe.
It wasn't real. It wasn't real. It was all a
fake
plot.
Crystal. That's true. I like to imagine that when Darth finally meets up with Luke, he explains it to them. What a foolish notion. Droids, attack. Anyway, that was a terrible Darth Vader, and I'll never do it again. Let's move on to the next story. The Flight of the Falcon, written by Steve Parkhouse with art by John Stokes once more. So, and interestingly enough, the colorist on this is Laura Allred, who has done a lot of colors across the world of comics. Anyhow, Flight of the Falcon is one of several takes in the Star Wars universe on the story of how the Millennium Falcon came to be, and particularly came to be in the possession of one Han Solo. Now, Nick, I'm going to defer to you for much of this because you are the Star Wars aficionado between us. You have probably encountered the story of the Millennium Falcon's creation many times.
No, actually, that's interesting because as you know, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but even as a fan in the '90s, I always kind of hated the expanded universe, so I mostly stayed away from it. There are different versions of it. The Sabacc game has always kind of played heavily into it. Sabacc is something like a cross between blackjack and poker in the Star Wars universe, a card game that is played between smugglers and gamblers. And the legend always was that he won the Falcon in a card game from Lando Calrissian. And there have been different takes on that over the years based on my understanding. And then in the film Solo that came out a couple of years ago, we actually got to see that particular game of Sabacc play out on the big screen. So there you are.
Interesting. I still haven't seen the movie Solo, so I gotta add that.
It is aggressively average.
Aggressively average.
It is average in every sense of the word. The only thing not average about it is Donald Glover, who is outstanding.
Are you suggesting that it is the 2009/10 Cody Rhodes of movies?
It's something like that, yes.
Well, that notwithstanding, in this version of events, the Millennium is the name of the manufacturing company of the ships, and they have provided the smugglers in this particular area of the galaxy with a I can't remember the name, the Millennium something, and it's not Falcon, it's the Millennium something else that is fast enough to evade imperial forces and get them through there with their cargo intact. And the Empire is pissed, and the Empire wants Millennium. They make a trip to Millennium. They want Millennium to build them a machine that is fast enough and strong enough and durable enough to not only catch these, but to blow past these smugglers and to annihilate them once and for all. And so they are given this ship called the Millennium Falcon that is going to be faster than any other ship that's ever been built. And unfortunately for the Empire, a secretary at the Millennium facility sells out their plans to one Han Solo, who, along with his buddy, the unnamed Lando Calrissian, and some other guy, knock out some stormtroopers, take their uniforms, and or Imperial Guards, I should say, and take their uniforms and steal the Millennium Falcon. And then Han tells the rebels what's going on, and the rebels go and bomb the hell out of this Millennium place and destroy the entire faculty along with its bald ruler. So while I probably made it sound silly in the way I was describing, I actually thought this was pretty entertaining. I don't know how close it is to what the current canon is on how the Falcon came to be created.
It is not anywhere close to that.
But I thought it was pretty interesting. I thought it was entertaining, and they had a good villain with the sort of the Millennium boss that reminded me a little bit of the mayor of Gotham City in Frank Miller's Batman Year One, or was it the police commissioner? I can't remember, but he was the guy that was always repeated himself. But yeah, so I thought this was a good story. I mean, it wasn't great. It wasn't nearly as good as the first one, but
yeah, it's not as good as either of the Alan Moore stories in this book, but it's better than the other one. So, it comes down somewhere there in the middle. It's good enough. I think it would have been a little bit better if it had been written entirely from the perspective of Han instead of just having him swoop in the last 8 to 12 panels or whatever. But
and this John Stokes fella draws a hell of a Han Solo.
Yeah, not bad at all. And again, the unnamed Lando, as you mentioned, but who is clearly Lando. But yeah, good stuff. Again, not as good as the Alan Moore stuff, but serviceable enough.
Indeed. Well, let's move on to the final story of this collection, and indeed the final story of our show that we'll be talking about. It is a story by Alan Moore and John Stokes, and it is called Blind Fury. And this one puts us in the eyes of really a third-person omniscient narrator, but from the perspective of Luke Skywalker. He's the hero and star of the show, and he is being engulfed by these mysterious creatures when the story starts, and it's seemingly to his doom. And we, through flashbacks, learn how he got there. He's going through the sort of lightsaber training methods that he learned in A New Hope, and he gets a distress call from a nearby planet. He follows this distress call to the planet and has to sort of wade his way into this planet of darkness, and he goes into this cave, and it's everything is dark and surrounds it just surrounds him and engulfs him. All these creatures attack him, but as he thinks he's about to perish, the creatures abandon him, and this voice beckons him, and he follows it through the corridor, and there are twists and turns along the way, and he finds out that he comes across this artificial intelligence that was created eons ago by someone who represented a people who went to war with the Jedi and lost. And he has held a grudge against the Jedi ever since, and has in fact imprisoned many of their essences in this artificial chamber of his for all of these centuries. And he doesn't understand that until Luke gets there, that the Jedi are no more, that all of them have been wiped out as of the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it's ultimately a story about the perils of vengeance and the perils of obsession, and along the way you get some just excellent Alan Moore prose in the form of the narrator. You get this just outstanding, great work of similes and metaphors, and a usage of language and talking about what heroes do. He should not have done. He should not, and yet he does. Things like that. It is really, really well written, and it reminds me of how good Alan Moore writes comic book heroes. So yeah, not as good as the first story, but really interesting, and almost it feels like. And I know you're not a big Star Trek guy, but it feels to me more like a Star Trek story than a Star Wars story. It feels like a one-off episode of the original series where Kirk might have ended up in the role of Luke Skywalker here. So I thought it was tremendous. It's probably the best writer in the history of comics, writing a strong character in Luke Skywalker. And again, something that would never probably take place in the proper Star Wars universe, but yet also feels like it kind of could. And so,
it's not inconceivable. Like it has certain trappings about it that you can see why it would fit even today. And it's interesting you draw the Star Trek comparison because of the one-off nature. That's something we've never really seen with the main Star Wars characters, is that, serial or that anthology type approach to just kind of one-off stories. I mean, we've seen those have happened in various comics over the years, but you and I haven't really read many of those. So it's interesting to see that approach applied here in this book. And this works for me. The art is really good in this. The concept is strong, and like you said, particularly Alan Moore's writing of the narration is just so poetic, and again reminds you of how good he used to be at this before he stopped wanting to do it.
Indeed. And so, exactly. I wish he wanted to do it again, because gosh, man, the way that he writes this is like he gets the classical hero in fiction, right. And that's what Luke Skywalker is, and that's what he is in this story, and this sort of villain that has this philosophical meaning behind it, which is reflective. That also reminds me of Star Trek a lot. I just thought it was really well done, and maybe, who knows, maybe in the future we can revisit the second volume of Devilworlds, perhaps Devilworlds when we, need another fill-in topic. And because I'm interested to read more of this, man, more of Alan Moore's work on Star Wars. So let's talk about our total takeaway on this. I was of course blown away by the Alan Moore stuff. I was expecting this to sort of be kind of filler material that, probably Alan Moore not putting his best foot forward on writing a one-off. And
ultimately, in terms of import and relevance to the larger Star Wars universe, it kind of is filler material. But yet, Alan Moore is still Alan Moore here.
Yeah, absolutely. The quality is certainly not filler quality. It's right. Even if he was half-assing this, it's done with thought and heart and import. It feels important. It feels like a story. They feel like stories that enhance the characters that are in them, and that's something that he was always an expert at doing when he wrote superheroes of any kind, whether it was Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, whoever. And so, it just great stuff that fits in with the Alan Moore pantheon. The other two stories, take them or leave them. I would leave one and take the other.
Yeah, mostly, yeah.
But yeah, so I'm interested to read more of this. And Nick, I'll go ahead and you've actually read the second issue. More of the same from Alan Moore.
Yeah, I mean, more really good stories. I would say that the next one is three different stories, and there's one story, the first one, which is a story about 3PO and R2 going to this planet of cast-off droids, and that story is just as good, I think. Well, maybe not just as good because it features the droids instead of Vader, but the writing from Alan Moore is almost as good as it was in that Vader story we both love so much. And then I think the other two stories, one is a Han and Leia story, and one's pretty much a Leia story, but not really a Leia story. She's just the character that we recognize and know in it. Neither of those are as good, I think, as the little Luke Blind Fury story from this book, but the Leia one in particular is very interesting because it features her running afoul of these like godlike creatures in the Star Wars universe who are just having fun, like manipulating matter and creating things and stuff. And it just, so much of it reminds you of kind of like an early version of what he would eventually write in Watchmen in terms of like the idea of creating life with Dr. Manhattan and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Maybe some of the early nuggets of the ideas that you would explore in that. Very, very interesting. Really looking forward to reading more of that. And also at some point when we get a chance to do a longer show, which won't be for a couple of weeks, I'll explain to everyone my thoughts on Doomsday Clock, which I have finished now. And looking forward to that. Nick, I know we're on Christmas week here. Any final thoughts to leave our listeners with as Wing It Month continues?
No, no final thoughts. This is actually, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, this is the final episode of Wing It Month. Wing It Month is now at an end. The next episode we bring you will be the first episode of Arrow Month as we celebrate and mourn the end of our beloved Arrow television show. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I think our next episode is us counting down our top 5 episodes in Arrow history. That'll be another abbreviated episode because of the holidays, but then after that we'll be back to you with full-length episodes as we continue the march to episode 200.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking time out of your holiday season to listen to us. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to drop us some nuggets of information about Alan Moore or about the Star Wars universe, please let us know through Twitter at gphillips8652, at Nick Duke 87, or join the Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page. I've got to get better about sharing our podcasts in there, but I will do my best to do that. In any event, we hope you're having a very Merry Christmas, very happy holidays, and we will see you next week.
Hard-Traveling Fanboys, 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 Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Place to Be Nations, JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have over 24 podcasts available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We now offer them to you on 2 great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we dive into topics running the gamut from today's WWE to the glory days of yesteryear and the ins and outs of the territory days. In addition to our full-length shows, we also deliver to you special pod blasts on topics old and new.
The Place to Be Nation Pop feed is a veritable treasure trove of great content, offering tremendous shows covering the land of movies, television, life, comics, and sports, brought to you by the most knowledgeable and insightful folks in the podcast world.
You can find all these great shows, plus archives of our past podcasts from over the past 8 years as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows, plus others, available on PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth search projects, and much more. Be sure to support our site by using www.PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping. And we want to thank our friends at Boneheads, Wing Bar, ProWrestlingOnly.com, and TheHistoryOfWrestling.com as well. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop